Yo, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. Today, I don't want to talk a lot. I want to get right into it. So I'll just introduce myself real quickly and then we'll get straight to the juice. My name is Jesse. I run this channel called How to Drum and Bass. And on this channel, it is my mission to teach you awesome stuff about drum and bass. And a lot of that awesome stuff is breakdowns of what the popular artists are doing right now. And I got another really exciting one for you guys. I'm all excited. I just got back from Rampage. I've got this fake tattoo stuck on my arm, which is not coming off. So I'm still in the afterglow of a lot of really good music. And one song that really stood out to me that was just super epic was this new song by Hedex. He wasn't playing there, but it got played several times and it's just an absolute banger. So I got straight to work to make a full drop reproduction of this absolutely awesome song. And we're gonna have a look together at that today. Now, this is not really a tutorial. This is more of a breakdown of how I did it, but we're still gonna dive into every single patch, every single thing that we did, and we're gonna get a broad view on the track arrangement, which is also really interesting. As always, you can find the presets in the link below for every rack and every MIDI file that we're going to use today. So even if you don't use Ableton, you can basically just get all the juice for free down in the link below. All right, let's dive in. So for those of you that need a little bit of a reminder what the song sounds like, it's basically a jump up song with a rap vocal and a noise bass, essentially, which that sort of setup where a UK rapper is rapping over a jump up song happens a lot in recent days, and it's pretty cool. I kind of like it, and it goes really hard. So this is the original.
Chillin' with my English girl, she low-key. She wanna go to the pub. Got Asian girl wanna come with a tug. Got African girl wanna come with a tug. Chillin' with my English girl, she low-key. She wanna go to the pub.
All right, some proper gun finger stuff right there. And with some borrowed vocals, this is the recreation that we are going to be talking about today.
Girl, she low-key. Chillin' with my English girl, she low-key. She wanna go to the pub. Got Asian girl wanna come with a tug. Got African girl wanna come with a tug. Chillin' with my English girl, she low-key. She wanna go to the pub.
All right, so I think that is super close, and that's also because actually this song is pretty simple. It just combines very simple elements in a really cool way. Now, for those of you who know from a long time ago, this is actually sort of a flip of Tokyo Drift, which is a really old song from, God, I think it's GTA San Andreas, but it could have been Need for Speed, I'm not sure. But it was all over the place like 15 years ago. They took this sample, or actually, I'm pretty sure they recreated that little bell sound and made it into a jump up banger. And we're gonna look as well at the origins of that sound, where it came from today, because it's super interesting. So let's dive into what this tune consists of and then break it down piece by piece. All right, so this song is actually really not that hard. It really just contains a couple of main components that make up the song. Most of it is determined by the bell sound that you hear and the noise bass and then a sub. But of course, we have some drums. There's actually nothing else going on but just a simple kick, pretty hard hitting, some hi-hats and a snare. There's no crazy patterns. There's a little bit of a kick in within the drums, which we'll dive into in a second. Nothing crazy there. There's, of course, the vocals, very standard pattern of the vocals repeating during the drop to sort of fill up the frequency spectrum and make it less empty. But the main thing really is this bell sound here, which is this. And then, of course, the noise bass paired with a big fat sub. And then lastly, there's a little bit of foliage and like background textures that we're gonna put in there, but that is the song. It's pretty simple. So let's get into step one, the drums. For the drums group, there's really only three elements. There's no crazy shuffles. There's no syncopated hi-hats or anything like that. There is a kick, and in this case, it's a pretty strong kick. It's pretty loud. Just a very standard drum and bass pattern. The same actually goes for the snare. It's literally just the most boring drum and bass pattern that you can find, which is this. Which still bangs, but okay. And then, yeah, there's just a little bit of hi-hats in there for some noise, I guess, for some extra top-end energy. But to be honest, most of the energy and the sort of noisy, higher frequency space is going to be filled up by some noise effects that we're going to have a look at a little bit later in the tutorial when we talk about the background textures. There is something interesting going on, though, there. If you hear in the original song, you hear that there's not really a drum roll going towards the drop. There's just the vocals sort of increasing in British intensity, and then one before the drop, which sort of, you know, is sort of the announcing drums in there, which you can hear here.
English girl, she low-key. She wanna go to the pub.
which I think that's pretty cool because it's very anticipatory. And this is quite interesting because this is a really big difference that I'm noticing between sort of the UK style of jump up and the jump up that is made by the rest of the world, is that the British jump up, it doesn't necessarily always have these fake drops and really big build-ups. It actually quite often will be a vocal that sort of rolls into the drop, and then the drop will be this sort of rollerish arrangement of jump up sounds, which clearly works very, very well. So that's something to think about for your next tune as well. You don't always need a big build-up to have something epic. And this makes it fit very well into a DJ set, for example, which I think is maybe also one of the reasons why this song is very popular right now. So that's it for the drums. There's nothing interesting going on. I basically just used samples, a little bit of saturation and a little bit of EQing to sort of give it some extra power because we have not that many elements, so we need the drums to really, really punch out. But otherwise, there's nothing interesting there. Then, of course, really quickly, we need to talk about the vocals. So obviously, I got the vocals from lala.ai, like I always do if you follow my tutorials. If you ever need vocals or you actually want to split any stem off of it, lala.ai is super awesome. It's an AI stem splitter. You can check it out in the link in the description, and you should get a discount because it does cost a bit of money, but it's 100% worth it. It's literally just an auto-tuned rap vocal. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of stuff that's done to it, but in terms of chopping the vocal up or anything like that, there's not much going on. It's literally just the guy rapping up until the drop, and then there's this little part repeating this. That's actually slightly auto-pan to sort of feign some stereo width and resounding realness, if you want to call it that. Otherwise, it's not really that interesting in terms of the vocals. All right, so let's dive into this bell sound. So like I said earlier, this bell sound, which sounds like this, is actually a sound that is just a preset from the Korg Triton. I looked for ages and ages and ages to find something. I actually spent a whole bunch of time trying to synthesize it myself, but it turns out it's something very specific. It is a Javanese gamelan that is a bamboo-like instrument, apparently. Yeah, you would have never guessed that makes this specific sound, and they use that sound along with some stock effects and whatever of the Korg Triton, which I'll show right here. Is a really cool synthesizer that actually, if you cycle through some hit songs from like when this thing came out, everything that you've ever loved is from a preset from the Triton. So this is also your call to go download the Korg Triton. It is really expensive. It's like $250, but you got to spend some money as a musician. And I totally, absolutely do not condone the piracy of this software, which I have no idea whether that's possible, but that's super not good, and don't do that because you need to pay for all of your stuff. Anyway, for those of you who don't want to go through all that trouble, I will include a sampled version of this bell down here so that you can actually go and just download it, which I think makes me right now the only provider on the internet of this specific sound, so that's also cool. And it really isn't all that interesting, actually. It is literally just these notes. It's C3, C sharp to F sharp, but the simplicity of it is what allows for this very nice call and response that we get with the noise bass. So let's really quickly dive into a little bit more of what's happening in this Korg Triton then. So like I said, the sound that was used in the original Tokyo Drift song from one of these video games is actually literally just a preset with nothing done to it. So it's the Bali Gamelan, like I said to you. I think it's written wrong here, but whatever. And then, yeah, there's an amplitude modulation going on, and there's an effect here. There's like a stereo maker, there's a chorus, and then there was actually on this preset some reverb, but I replaced that with my own reverb. But other than that, it sounds like this. Out of the box, it sounds good. The only things that I opted to do for this is when you're working with sampled instruments, sometimes you want to see if an OTT can make things sound a little bit more out there. That's because back in the day when they used these, they would compress the hell out of everything back like in the studio after sampling it. So that's something that you want to have a look at. And then all that's happening really is some boost in the low frequencies, which really there isn't that many. Just to sort of give it some space in that mix with some lower frequencies because the sub doesn't really fit under this bell sound. Some extra compression, and then what you hear on the last bar, which is also interesting, which I'm hearing a lot in Jump Up right now, is this sort of scratch back, sort of pitch down going into the drop, which is just very, very easily achievable by just using a shifter actually and automating the fine parameter. And if the fine parameter isn't enough, you can actually just get another shifter and do another fine parameter, or you can opt to also automate a little bit of the coarse pitch. In this case, it was actually just enough to let it go down like halfway through the note and get this effect. And then what's nice is that the last note is not pitched down so that it brings back that energy, but you do have that sort of drop in energy that makes it a little bit more dynamic. And then last, of course, this needs to sidechain to the kick and the bass, for which I would always recommend Duck Buddy, or as I'm getting more into myself, it also really helps to do manual sidechaining with just volume shaping on your automation. That's also a very good substitute. So this right now is sidechaining at not that much ducking, actually, just about 30 dB, because we don't want the bell to disappear. We just wanted to make room for the kick so that we keep that energy in there. And so it's basically these notes. So it's like the C3 going into the C sharp and the F sharp for the first sort of anticipatory part. And then during the drop, it repeats itself in this specific pattern. I will put the MIDI file in the free download below. And yeah, that's basically it. And just really quickly, I'm just super excited about doing this and sharing this with you, because it shows you that actually making really cool stuff doesn't have to be hard. A lot of really great tunes were made with presets from synthesizers here, there, and everywhere. And for me personally, the Korg Triton, if you can get your hands on it, it's super fun. It contains, because it's all sampled random instruments that someone came up with, I don't know when, but they're all really, really cool, very diverse. They sound super good right out of the box, and it's just a real big bundle of inspiration right there, and a nice refresher from doing all this sound design yourself in programs like Serum. So 10 out of 10 recommend the Korg Triton plugin. Right, then let's quickly talk about the noise base. So the noise base consists of two parts. The first part is, of course, the noise base itself, which we'll talk about in a second. But the other part is just this big fat sub, and that really does fill up the track. It's got a lot of volume, and it makes a lot of impact on how hard that noise base is perceived, because the noise base itself, as we'll see in a minute, only fills up a particular spectrum of frequencies and sounds kind of on its own. Okay, so what is this sub? It's extremely simple. It is literally just a Serum patch that is slightly distorted with some overdrive here. It is a BD sine, which I like to do for my subs now always, because it's less clean than a sine, so it gives a little bit warmer. You can see in the wavetable editor that it's got all this sort of inverted phase and like a little bit messiness here and some extra harmonics that affect it, but don't really not make it a sine wave, which if you want to learn more about how this works, we talk a lot about it in Drum Bass Sound Design Mastery, so go check that out in the link below. But basically, this is an analog BD sine with nothing done to it but a MG low that provides some drive so that gets a little bit fatter. I key track that as well, but I honestly don't think that it matters that much. And then there's some asym distortion going on right here with like 56% drive and a low filter to cut out whatever that asymmetric stuff is adding, so that it all sounds like this. And the reason that we do this filtering is because it means that we can sort of crunch up that low end by adding, you know, saturation frequencies and distortion frequencies, and then just take them out again. Because if we didn't do that, it'd sound like this. It sounds very thin, and we just want to keep the low part, but we want to saturate it. So that's why we use a filter and then distortion and then another filter. This kind of technique also helps to get more frequencies on speakers, for example, that are not able to play super low frequencies. If you have a sub that also occupies the sort of next to sub frequency, so like that 100 to 300 range, depending on sort of what tonality you want, then your sub is just going to sound louder and more present, even on systems that don't have such strong bass capacity. So this is what it sounds like. And of course, you're hearing these little pauses in there, but because it's ducking really aggressively at 60 dB for the kick and the snare, because the bass obviously really needs to make room for this powerful, saturated kick. And then lastly, there's some extra overdrive on there, which does add a little bit of punch. It's not really necessary, but something to play around with is to add some extra overtones to your sub to see how it fits in the mix after you've added all the... Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but it is a way to get some more fullness in your low end. Then let's talk about the noise base. So the noise base by itself sounds like this, which, as I said, is really not that interesting. It actually, to me, sounds like someone who's brushing something off it. But the magic happens, of course, when you pair it with this big, fat sub. And then put it in the rest of the song with some of the background elements that we're going to talk about in a minute. And just as a quick side note, this tends to happen a lot in the really popular drum and bass / jump uppy songs that are happening now from like Chase and Status and Hedex and sort of all the rappers that are hopping on everywhere, is that the elements themselves are not actually that large, but because there's so much going on, there's a lot of background textures, there's a big fat sub under there, all of that carries these sort of smaller sounds. So when you're in your DAW and you're making stuff, actually, maybe you already have a fat sound and you don't need to work that patch that more. You just need to add more stuff around it to give it a better environment to thrive in. That's something to think about. All right, so let's then have a look at how this noise base is made, because once again, actually, it's really not that hard. We are gonna do some sound design, but essentially what it is, it's a volume automated noise sound. That's basically it. So really quickly, you can see that I have an erosion, an overdrive, and a shaper box here. You don't really need to worry about that so much right now. We're gonna dive into it, but they're actually not necessary. I only use them to get sort of the tonality right for this specific sound to sound as much as possible like the song. But the essence of this type of sound is very simple. It is a noise oscillator that is volume automated with a very quick, snappy LFO just like this, and that is then slightly filtered and distorted a bunch. That is the whole essence. You will see that I actually have an oscillator here. This oscillator is not necessary, really. I just added it because I think when you're designing a sound like this, adding more frequencies is usually better, makes it sound fuller. But actually, if we were to solo this by itself versus with the oscillator, it doesn't actually make that much of a difference. So really most of it is this noise, so a bright white noise that has a little trick to it. And this is something that I personally really like. So when we're talking about distortion, and by the way, if you want to know more about distortion, we talk about every single type of distortion in Serum Sound Design Mastery. But beyond distortion plugins, there's another way to get distortion, which is much more natural, and that is super quick volume automation. And that is actually what we're doing here, so I want you to pay attention.
Hey, quick break. If you're enjoying these videos and you like my style of teaching, and you've been feeling like you want to get more into sound design, specifically for drum and bass, then maybe you want to check out my brand new online course called Drum and Bass Sound Design Mastery. It's an absolutely massive course with over 150 videos spanning 14 hours of content, where we teach you two things. In the first half, we teach you everything there is to know about synthesizing sound in Serum. And in the second part, we show you how to use that knowledge to create the most popular sounds in drum and bass. I guess you can see it like the ultimate masterclass of drum and bass sound design. So if that sounds like something you could be interested in, check the link in the description below to find out more about this awesome course. All right, let's get on with the video.
We have this noise here, and you can see that LFO1 is shaping the entirety of this noise level, as well as oscillator A. But for all purposes right now, you can assume that oscillator A is a wavetable that's also going to generate some type of noise. So actually, both of them are generating noise, and their levels are being modulated. The problem with noise is you can't properly distort noise because it's noise. It is distortion. We can't distort it traditionally. But we can add really quick volume automation to it to change its inflection, or maybe, I'm not really sure what to call it, but I'm gonna let you hear what I mean. So we have this LFO3 here that is actually controlling the level in its entirety of this noise, but it's moving super fast. You can see it here. The line doesn't even hold up. That's how fast it goes. It goes at 50.5 hertz. What this is doing is it's really rapidly putting up and down the volume of the noise. So it's making it go basically. So the difference between what that does versus when you don't have that, let's bypass it right now. Right, and let's also take this oscillator out real quick. So that is just very, very boring noise. But then when we add this super fast LFO that's literally just on the level, we get this. And you can hear that there's a sort of degrading, raspy quality to it, which I personally just think is very cool. Now, of course, another component here is the filtering. So we have two types of automation going on really here. One of them is, of course, this noise that has level automation, and this oscillator, which, by the way, you can actually substitute this oscillator for pretty much any of the weird digital wavetables, as long as you put it low enough and you just make it really quickly on this LFO. It'll basically just sound like noise if you put a mirror warp on it as well. But of course, there is on all of these, there is some filter automation, which also really makes a difference, because if you didn't have it, it would be this. So that actually does a lot of the shaping. And it's important to note also that we want to have shaping here. That's why we're using this filter, but we don't actually want it to cut out that many frequencies. That's why usually there's limited use cases for going for a low 6, in my opinion. But in this case, it works really, really well. It works a lot better, in my opinion, than the low 18, for example, because it makes it a lot more sort of clean and choppy, which is not exactly what we want. We want something gritty. So let's have a quick look at the effects then. You can see that there is hyper and dimension in here, which is not up right now, but which I would put up if I was playing this in a mix. The reason for that is in Serum, there is only a mono noise. And when we work with such a filling element, we probably want the top end to be, at least the top end to be stereo. That's why you can go and add some voices with some hyper and dimension. It would be a good idea to get this sound out there in the stereo field. Then, of course, we're working with several types of distortion. Here, we've got a diode distortion that's slightly post-filtered, so we're taking out a little bit of those super highs, everything beyond 6K, although the slope of this filter actually is like a 6 filter, I think, so it's really not that aggressive. We have some compression, because what you'll notice when you're working with noise is that you actually want to have certain frequencies accentuated and everything also needs to be louder. The gain is quite high here, and you can see that we've taken the mids in a little bit more, which has this effect. Just makes it a little bit more slappy, a little bit more, you know, sort of aggressive. And then it's also very important, the low end of noise is usually not that nice. So there's a big difference by scooping it out or not. If we also take out these two that are in post-production, then it really sounds pretty crappy without these EQing. Sounds more like someone knocking on your door. So we want to high pass this actually several times during the process. Now, the last of these things are just optional in terms of if you wanted to create a noise base for yourself. I put a reverb filter on it just because it has all those spikes just like a comb filter, and I was looking for a particular type of tonality. Noise can be very hit or miss. It can be very boring, but when it has the right spikes and the right sort of resonances, it can be super sharp and super dirty, and that's what I was looking for. All the flange filters or some of the miscellaneous filters like the reverb filter and the combs filter are fantastic for this. And then, yeah, there's some things that you can add, like some delay and some reverb, but really the key is in choosing a noise source, distorting it with this volume automation, giving it a short LFO, that's, by the way, also very important. If this were to be bigger, it really wouldn't sound that good, because then we just don't have this aggressiveness. We want this to be short. So this is a really nice shape for that, for just something stabby. All right, let's dive quickly into post-production, because when you're then working with noise, you can sort of say, okay, I've got noise. It's kind of the same messy crap everywhere in the frequency spectrum, but you can then go and affect which parts of that jump out. So we can use an erosion to add extra noise, like different noise, and we can even choose to add some wide noise, so that's stereo noise on top of that. There are other erosion plugins if you don't have Ableton. Same goes for overdrive. Overdrive essentially is like a noisy saturator for just a certain band of frequencies. And I just played around with these a little bit until I got close to the sound that Hedex has, which I think we got like 90% close here. Then it's important to sort of keep filtering out these lower frequencies. I've done that a few times here. I could probably clean this up and have less EQs going on, but this just happened in producing it. But I noticed that also the signal flow does matter when you're trying to saturate noise or add things to noise. So this shaper box is another distortion, which actually just has like an extreme full type distortion at a very high drive on just a little bit of the mids, because I found that is where some real nice extra crunch was found as well. But interestingly enough, it only sounds good between two low passes. It doesn't actually sound that good just before one or after one. And that's also just something interesting to think about. Whenever you're saturating something, you want to know that you saturate the right frequencies, or it will sound differently than what you might intend, even when you're using something as shaper box, because every multi-band saturation plugin will have these tails like this that still affect a large part of the frequency spectrum. So doing the right type of filtering, if you're looking for like snappy high end or better mid-range frequencies that are like nasty, you really want to make sure that you're saturating the right frequencies. So that's what we did here. And then finally, it's just sidechaining to the kick and the snare here. So yeah, all of that, if we were to take the drum group and then the vocals, of course, and the bells, and then the noise base and the sub, it would sound like this. But what you can hear is, because we have such little elements, there is a little bit of emptiness going on in the track. It's not entirely full yet, and somehow when you look at all these really, really popular tracks, they never seem to have a dull moment in them. And there's actually a really easy way to fix that, which is with what I like to call some foliage. I'm not sure that's really the correct term. I think it's probably called background textures, but I like foliage because foliage is like trees and shit and shrubberies that nobody cares about, but if it wasn't there, it would be weird. And that's the same with a lot of the effects that you can add. So actually just adding like a spray paint can or some white noise or some crashes can really fill up a track a lot. So in this case, what we have here, and which is I'm 100% sure also what's happening in the track itself, is a spray can noise. So like a, like a graffiti type can that's just been like elongated a lot. So you can see a frozen track here, but it's literally just a sample playing with like a really aggressive delay with lots of feedback here. That's auto-panned slightly to make it a little bit more stereo, and then with like a long reverb tail on over it that just comes in as soon as that drop hits and just kind of fades out all throughout the track. But it provides a layer, a bed to sit in for all the other elements that just makes it that much nicer to listen to. And that's actually the only other element, because it just carries on throughout the entire drop, but it does fill up that drop section really nicely. So that's everything to recreate this song. Let's listen to it one more time.
Chilling with my English girl, she low-key. She wanna go to the pub. Got Asian girl wanna come with a tug. Got African girl wanna come with a tug. Chilling with my English girl, she low-key. She wanna go to the pub.
Sick. All right, guys, that was the video. I hope you enjoyed this one. I think I went through it at a lot quicker pace than I usually do. Also, I want to know from you, if you're still watching, do you prefer like these full drop tutorials over the single sound tutorials that I've been doing? Or do you prefer the shorter, snappier videos about single sounds? I really want to know from you guys, because after all, I make content for you and I want to do what is best for you guys. So let me know down in the comments, please. And also, if you haven't yet, please subscribe, like the video, comment. Even if you don't care, it really helps me and the algorithm get this video out to more people like you that are trying to learn about drum and bass. So help a brother out. And that's it. Thank you so much for watching this video, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one.